Ear check.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today's guest is Blythe Karrow, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Evren Technologies. And what they do, they have a vagus nerve stimulator, auricular vagus nerve stimulator, which helps treat PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so basically, this wearable device allows you to kind of calm down and not have the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder anymore. So very interesting conversation, and enjoy. Okay, Blythe Karrow, pleasure to have you on the show. You are co-founder, president, and CEO of Evren Technologies. And what Evren does is basically do a wearable PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder treatment. And it's a vagus nerve stimulator, a wearable vagus nerve stimulator. So you guys are basically going after many times soldiers or anybody else who might be affected by PTSD. So pleasure to have you on the show. Do you want to introduce yourself and the technology a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. We're excited to be here. Evren has been in business since basically the beginning of 2019. It's IP out of the University of Florida. And we are developing an earbud that is auricular vagal nerve stimulation. Auricular is the ear anatomy, and there are some advantages to that we can get into later if we want to. We decided to go after PTSD because we know there's a great need in that space. There's about a 66% unmet medical need there. And the numbers are growing. COVID and other pandemics are expected to have tripled the cases of PTSD. And before that, we knew that about 7.5 million people sought treatment every year in the US. And usually you think of veterans, and there are a lot of veterans with PTSD. We see returning troops presenting at about 20%, but also the first responder community gets it at the same rate. And nowadays we have more first responders than military. And 1 in 9 women will have it at some point in their lives, which is a pretty big number. They get it at a rate about twice what men get.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, and then that's actually something I didn't mention in the introduction, that you're also based here in Gainesville, or just outside of Gainesville. And when I found that out, we had already been talking a little bit when I found that out. I'm just like, wow, that's small world. So you basically you took this technology, spun out of University of Florida, and then you were able to license it, or what did that look like, I guess?
Yeah, we licensed it through the Office of Technology Licensing. I had actually met the 3 inventors because they were looking at licensing it to a meditation app that did biofeedback, and they were going to add it to their therapy. And when I was talking to them, found out that they had some of the first results on PTSD, and I got really excited about that indication. And it's highly scalable technology. Vagal nerve stimulation is being used from everything from rheumatoid conditions to stroke rehab to mental health, behavioral health issues. So there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. And in the future, we probably will. But right now, we're very focused on PTSD. And we've added a suite of products to support the PTSD patient, along with, a symptom tracking app for them and ways they can connect to their clinician, things like that.
Interesting. So you have some background in medical devices, but then you saw. I guess I'm curious about, like, you saw the potential in this, or you talked to them, and then you were looking to do something new, or how did that basically come about?
Yeah, so Weaver, my executive chairman, and we met in Gainesville. I had been in medical device for about 20 years, and Gainesville's my hometown, and I decided to move back and try and find a job in the South. And I met the woman who founded the innovation hub here at the University of Florida, and she was like, oh no, you need to stay in this area. Like, we need to keep talent in this area. And she started introducing me to other entrepreneurs in the area, and that's how I met Weaver. And he was looking at a different kind of technology at the time that I wasn't too jazzed about. But we basically decided we wanted to work together, but we needed the right technology. And meanwhile, the Office of Technology Licensing kept sending me things they thought I might be interested in. And since I had most recently worked at Boston Scientific doing the digital health strategy and implementation for the spinal cord stim group, they were sending me everything that popped up in neuromodulation. So that's how we came across it.
How long were they sending you possibilities?
Well, I think I moved here. I moved back here in 2017, and I probably came across their technology in early 2018.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, it's about the time that I came here as well. I came here March 2018 to Gainesville, so that's kind of funny. Um, yeah, very interesting. So I guess what were you looking for, and what were the acceptance criteria for something like that?
Well, it's quite a complex puzzle, right? You want to make sure the need is there, that there's a viable go-to-market pathway, and you need the technology to be far enough along so that there's something to it, right? It can't just be an idea. And so you want a working prototype. And they had done some research with the same stim parameters already. So we knew that there was a level of impact there. We've had to do a little bit more work to get it to a place that the FDA was interested in since then. But it's, really it's all about the market need and whether we can get it to market and whether it's a viable technology.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the technology a little bit. We have talked a little bit about auricular vagus nerve stimulation. Yeah, a lot of people might not know that the vagus nerve, which is arguably one of the most important nerves in the body, actually goes to the ear as well, and you can stimulate this without needing to implant a device. So how does this work? How is this possible? And then what are some of the effects of vagus nerve stimulation?
Yeah, so I mean, Vegas is called Vegas because in Latin it means wandering, so it goes all over the body. And the auricular branch is interesting because those nerves are going straight into the brain centers that they want. It's all afferent nerve fibers. And traditionally, where vagus nerve was done is in cervical placement. So there is a major bundle that travels down the neck, and they'll wrap sort of an electrode around the vagus nerve. And if you stimulate in that area, you can get some negative side effects based on the innervation of adjacent anatomy. And you can't do it on the right side of the neck, you can only do it on the left side. So with the ear placement, you don't get any of those side effects. But stimulating the vagus nerve does have a lot of great effects to it. So we might have side effects. I'll give that air quotes, but they're positive ones. It's a calming impact on the body. So you basically have two major mechanisms of action. One is that it helps you lay stronger neural pathways. So a lot of people do research in vagal nerve stim, pairing it with some sort of learning activity. So there are folks pairing it with neonatal bottle feeding to get preemies to learn how to bottle feed. You have people pairing it with stroke rehab. And a lot of people think that you need to pair vagal nerve stimulation with cognitive behavioral therapy to have an impact on PTSD. But the fact is, we have another mechanism of action, which is that it has an impact on the autonomic nervous system. So, your autonomic nervous system has a couple of different aspects, but the two that we like to focus on are your sympathetic and parasympathetic balance. So, your sympathetic response is, you have a trauma or some intense situation, your body goes into your sympathetic response that we usually think of as fight or flight. It's evidently fight or flight or freeze. But that's a normal response to have. The problem is that people with PTSD never fully get back into the parasympathetic state of rest and recuperate. And that causes a whole bunch of problems. And that hypervigilance basically leads to all of the symptoms that we typically talk about with startle response and anxiety and things like that. And when you stimulate the vagus nerve, you're boosting parasympathetic response. So you're boosting that calming of the body. And that also ends up, the reason it works for anti-inflammatory conditions is that calming also has an impact on the anti-inflammatory side.
Yeah, I've heard it called actually the placebo effect. Like, when you're doing a drug trial, then you have to make sure that it's better than placebo because you can have a calming effect by even taking a sugar pill. And so, actually, I had met with Weaver Gaines, a few weeks back, and this is something that we had talked about there too. And yeah, that it could be essentially activating the placebo effect. Whatever's going on when you take that sugar pill, that's essentially what the vagus nerve is doing as well. So it is this calming effect. So you're able to flip that stress response back to normal with the PTSD patients. And is that a one time thing? Is that a one time flip, or does that have to be reflipped?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, we wouldn't say we're flipping it to normal because we try to avoid normal as a label. When it comes to these things, we boost the parasympathetic response. Um, you see an immediate impact. So, the measurement we use to measure the impact on the parasympathetic nervous system is a type of high frequency heart rate variability called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA. So we look at RSA, and by definition, it is a highly variable type of high frequency heart rate variability. So you have to kind of take a snapshot over time and average it. And you try and get people in like a very calm state. So we'll have them watch like a really boring documentary that's just engaging enough so that their mind doesn't wander. And so we'll measure that. And first, we started by measuring it in the general population and saw that we were getting an RSA impact with our prototype device. So we know, okay, we're innervating the right nerves and we're getting that impact. And but there have also been some very interesting studies around RSA and PTSD. So what the FDA likes to use, and a lot of doctors in the U.S., is what we call the CAPS-5. That's the clinician administered PTSD scale. So there have been some studies where they show that people that test highly on the CAPS-5 have a lower than average RSA than the general population. And as they improve in their CAPS-5, you will see that their average RSA will improve. So we know that we get an immediate impact while you're wearing it on your RSA, but we know that as you continue to use it, your average RSA when you're not wearing it will improve as well. So we should see long-term effects on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and that's a good way to, I guess, quantify it, because I guess PTSD is very hard to quantify, right? Like, how is that currently done?
Yeah, there is no like, okay, if your RSA is at X, we count this as PTSD. There is no agreement on that right now. And one of the things we're hoping to get to with the data collection on the back end with our device is that we can maybe get to this type of phenotyping or biomarker level in the future. Right now, the CAPS-5 is considered the gold standard in the US. So it is a 1 hour clinician administered questionnaire, basically, and they look at the intensity and frequency of your symptoms and get a severity score for each symptom. And symptoms are in 4 different clusters, which I will forget if you have me list them out. But things like nightmares and avoiding social interactions and things like that. And then you get a scale score from 0 to 80, and you have to have a traumatic event and a symptom in each of the symptom clusters to be considered having PTSD. So you could have a score of even up to 30 and not have PTSD because you don't hit all the criteria in combination.
Hmm, interesting. Yeah, and it's very subjective. I mean, I'm sure if you got the wrong answer, like you're like, oh, I wanted this, answer, that you could probably go to a different physician and and maybe get different scores, right?
Yeah, as an exercise within the company, we watched this thing. You can go on the VA website and they have an example CAPS-5 that you, as a clinician, can walk. I guess anybody can sign up for it, but clinicians can watch it and see how someone responded and see and try to score it themselves and see if they get the right score, and they learn about how you do the severity and intensity. And I will say that as much as I have known about it, I'm not a clinician, but um, it was a very interesting learning experience for us. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so let's say you do get this, PTSD, uh, kind of, uh, oh no, medicate. I don't know. Oh, let's say that they say you have PTSD. So what are the current treatments for it? Is there medication? Is there
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy, or what's the resolution for this?
Yeah, those are basically the two major things. So SSRIs, antidepressants, and a variety of different therapies, but they really all tend to fall under the bucket of exposure therapies. So you're talking about the trauma, or you're visualizing the trauma, or something along those lines, but they're all basically some type of exposure therapy. So excuse me. With therapies, you have a large percentage of the population that aren't willing to start it. And then you have a pretty high dropout rate from that sort of first meeting to continue. And so you can actually make the condition worse by having someone come in, talk about their trauma, and then be unwilling to continue with the therapy. You've now sort of like picked at the scab, right? Um, and then with the drugs, there are lots of side effects. So if you talk to my patient advisory board, the majority of them have given up the drugs because the side effects were worse than any benefits they were getting from them. There are some new things coming down the pipeline. You know, some people are starting to use stellate ganglion block. That's a surgical procedure you can do. Um, they are looking at, a lot of people are starting to talk about MDMA and different psychotropic drugs. Now, those are potentially helpful, but those are done in combination with a therapy. So if you're unable or unwilling to get through a therapy, you can't use those drugs. Same with EMDR, which is the rapid eye movement. I could have gotten that wrong. Sometimes I flip the initials on that. But that's also self-selecting. You're not going to get to that unless you have been able to get through therapy and the therapy proved not as effective as you wanted it, and then you go to this next level of therapy. Um, so, and then I guess we also have people that do things like drink a couple of glasses of wine every night before they go to bed, or self-medicate with marijuana, or use medicinal marijuana. It's not well established in the literature yet, but I certainly know some people that believe that it helps them. I
Yeah, I
wouldn't
mean,
advise the drinking a lot of alcohol. That's alcoholism, so that's not actually advised.
sacrificing the brain, or sorry, sacrificing the liver for the brain.
Right.
Okay, so what's your device, and how does it work, and how do you know that you're stimulating the vagus nerve?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we know we're stimulating because we see the RSA response from the stimulation. So that's how we know. It's very hard to actually put some sort of monitoring device on the nerves in the auricular anatomy because they're not big enough. By the time they're big enough, they're in the brain. So that's a little invasive. But so that's how we know it's impacting it. We've also measured it on the CAPS-5. So we've done a pilot, and we had people baseline their symptoms for a month and take the CAPS-5 with a clinician. And then we treated them for a month and they took the CAPS-5. And then we did a second month and they took the CAPS-5. So at the end of 2 months, we had, out of 10 patients, one was a non-responder, although she did have a triggering event a couple weeks before that final thing, which can throw off your numbers. And one was pretty non-compliant. So we threw out her numbers anyway, even though she did have over a 6-point reduction, which is what the FDA looks for. So of the leftover 8, we had an average over 21-point reduction in the CAPS-5 scale, which was great. So we had clinically and statistically significant results there. So that's how we know the device works for PTSD. The device itself is ultimately going to be in an earbud form factor. I will say currently it is a fanny pack prototype, so not as cool. But it will easily miniaturize down into the form factor that we want on the ear, and it will be connected via Bluetooth to an app. So how it works is you turn it on and you say, start calibration, and then you tell me when you feel the stimulation, and you hit a button when you feel it. And then we calibrate from there, and it will give you a half hour or an hour's therapy. And it's going to measure your heart rate while we do that and calculate that RSA. And we use RSA. We have, what's central to our IP is that we provide personalized dosing. So we measure that RSA. And when your RSA is very low, we're going to stim more. And when it's very high, we're going to say, you don't need this on. You're testing very well. You're doing well. And, you're not, let's say you decide to run for the bus, right? Your heart rate, your RSA is going to change. We don't want to stim you when your body is supposed to have a natural sympathetic response, right? So, but we advise that people use it a half hour in the morning, a half hour in the evening. And what was interesting was, one, we had highly compliant patients, which is unusual for a PTSD study. And two, they really wanted to use it more than we advised. So they started wanting to use it when they go somewhere that they thought might trigger them, or they got very good at identifying when they were having an adverse emotional response to something. And they would say, you know what, I'm going to go grab our Phoenix and I'm going to use it and calm myself down. And they really liked having it as a tool that they could use to control their own balance.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, it's almost like a security blanket that you can go pick up. So,
Yeah.
is there an average patient or something like this, or how many hours per day would you expect, for them to use this, and does this change over time as well?
Well, right now, we just told everybody to use it a half hour in the morning, a half hour in the evening.
Okay.
Could be that you could use it as little as a half hour. Certainly, people started to want to wear it more and they wanted to wear it around. So, and it doesn't hurt you to use it more. One, as I said, there aren't really any known major significant adverse events when it comes to vagal nerve stim, but also because we have this RSA measurement algorithm in there, if your RSA is normalizing, then if you're at what's considered a non-therapeutic level, then we'll turn the therapy off. So you don't really have to worry about that.
So they could have the security blanket, it's just not activated, and it's not necessarily not that it would do anything, not that it would cause an adverse event, as you were saying. Uh, yeah, very cool. So you guys are still kind of in the prototyping phase, and then you have to get FDA approval for this, right? What are the next steps for the company?
Yeah, so we pretty much have our product specs set at this point. We're in the middle of raising money to finish the industrial design and get through our FDA clinical trial. And we'll be submitting for a breakthrough device designation next week. We talked to the FDA about it earlier, and they specifically wanted data where we measured the stimulation to the CAPS-5. So they asked us to apply when we had the results of this pilot. So we recently wrapped up the pilot, so we'll be applying. We're very excited about that. And yeah, the round that we're raising now should get us through to product launch.
Wow, that's really exciting. You're going to be dealing with a lot of flurry of activity, and I think that's very very cool stuff. So I think
Oh yeah, I
this
forgot to
is
mention, we also just got an SBIR grant from the NIH to create a laboratory version of the device. So basically, it's a research version. There are a lot of people wanting to research, and they don't really have a good option for a take-home TAVNS device. So we are working with researchers across the US that work in the TAVNS world to figure out what types of parameters they'd most want. A lot of biofeedback in there, not just from our RSA measurements, but what other wearables might they be interested in, things like that, so that we can really help move forward the world of TAVNS research.
wow. Yeah, no, I think once patients see that that the treatment is there finally is something that works compared to something literally nothing, then I think people will be knocking down your door to get to it. What are some I guess your biggest challenges with the product and with PTSD as well?
Yeah. So being the CEO, my biggest challenge is like I need money. So I want to get the ball rolling quickly. We want to get it to market as soon as possible to help people. I hate it now that I'm working in this. Anytime I hear about a suicide or some event that occurs because the person might have had PTSD and not getting the right kind of treatment, it physically hurts to know that we are slowed down by funding to get this to product to the market. When it comes to the actual product and what we're working on in terms of risk to the device, I think there are products out there that have tried to do vagal nerve stimulation in the ear. And unfortunately, a lot of them are a bit kludgy in the sense that they don't get comfortable stimulation without some sort of wet, icky factor in the ear. Is there electrode gel? Are we spraying in saline solution? Are there wet sponges? So we know that there are a few different things that impact the comfort of the stimulation. Some of it is the waveform itself. Other things are really around the impedance through the skin and the ear, and that is a combination of things like the actual skin conductance, the conductant material, the fit, the pressure we're using, the shape of the electrode. And so getting that combination in the earbud is sort of our secret sauce. So that's part of what's cool about the technology as well.
So you wouldn't need any icky wet stuff in the ear.
Fingers crossed, no. We did use electrode gel during the pilot study with our prototype, but we also during that time worked with one of our product development partners to do a really in-depth study on different electrode materials. So we've got it narrowed down to about one or two materials that we'll be moving forward with for the next version.
Wow, that's exciting stuff. And then, so once this device, gets FDA approved and everything like this, what would how would people be able to get their hands on it? I mean, would they have to get it as a prescription through a doctor, or would they be able to buy it on Amazon, or what are you thinking?
Great question. It will be a prescription device. One of the things the FDA requires to have it be over the counter where you can buy it without a prescription is that you can self-diagnose. And they certainly do not think of PTSD as being something you can self-diagnose. So you will need a prescription, but we will allow you to order it online. You just have to give us the prescription in order to do that. And we'll also make it very easy to connect to like a teledoc type of telepsychiatry platform out there to in case you need to get help with a prescription.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Blythe, this has been excellent. I've really enjoyed this, and I've my fingers crossed for the work that you guys are doing. Hopefully, get the FDA approval and everything like this. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
Um, well, I think what one of the interesting areas we are looking at right now, we had a little inkling during our clinical trial, was that it's possible that we are having a really solid, extremely strong impact for PTSD patients that also have a TBI.
Hmm.
The few that we had in our small cohort did very well. We're talking scores in the 40s and 50s down to the single digits, basically to remission. And so we're starting to explore further our impacts in the TBI space, whether it's in combination in treating PTSD as a specific target segment or as a standalone to treat TBI. So that's another area we're exploring.
So, I mean, you did kind of not shun, but like you were kind of like in the beginning, in the introduction, like, oh, soldiers aren't necessarily, there's many more people like that. But in this case, it sounds like soldiers might be, one of the biggest, benefactors of this, because that would be something that potentially there's a bomb or something like this, and then you know PTSD on top of that. So that sounds like
Certainly.
that sounds like a perfect project for DARPA.
Right. So anybody from DARPA who might be listening, actually, we had a really good conversation with DARPA the other day. They seem to be interested. So we'll continue to talk to them about that.
As they should be. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I think it's really cool. I mean, vagus nerve stimulation is it's a fascinating subject, and it just affects so many things. It's kind of like a miracle cure, but it really is like based on the data, like data science. It really is, and it's amazing how well it works.
Well, we certainly like to hear it referred to as a miracle cure more than it being referred to as a placebo effect.
As a placebo effect, yeah, it's not the placebo effect. But it is I don't know how to describe it, but it is the placebo effect. You're turning on the placebo effect, something like that. I don't know if I'm
I
describing it well.
get the mentality behind it in the sense that there are natural ways you can stimulate the vagus nerve through breathing exercises and sometimes we might even be doing things to stimulate the vagus nerve and not consciously. Like it could be that overeating is somehow because of the neck motion activating your vagus in a way that mentally calms you without us understanding it. And we still have a lot to learn about how the vagus nerve works, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's a great takeaway. I think that's a great way to end the episode. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.